Welcome everyone if you're just tuning in. Thanks for joining today's webinar, New Year, New HR, Top Workforce Planning Tips for 2018. Whew, getting close to the holidays. We can see the finish line. Thanks for taking time out of your calendars during this busy holiday season. We've got some really fantastic content for you today, brought to you by Namely and Jazz HR. So if you could you should be able to see my screen okay. Just tweet at Namely HR with hashtag HR2018. So we can know, one, that you're in the lobby ready to rock, and two, that you can hear us and see our screen okay. We'll get started in just about 2 or 3 minutes. We want to give everyone enough time to join in who might be joining at the top of the hour. All right, we got a full house today, a lot of great content. Thank you everyone for joining in. We are going to be chatting today about top workforce planning tips for 2018. Let us know throughout the course of the webinar if you're, thanks, can hear us and see our screen. So let us know throughout the course of the webinar if you have any questions. We are available in the Q&A section, and we're also available on Twitter via the hashtag and handle that you currently see. I'm gonna go ahead. You should be able to see me okay. I got one comment that they can't see my screen. Should be good now. So thank you for letting us know. That's how we'll communicate with the audience throughout the course of this webinar. So as I mentioned, today we're going to be chatting about New Year, New HR, top workforce planning tips for 2018. We've come together with our friends and partners at Jazz HR. I'm here from Namely. My name is Alex. I'll be the MC today. We'll get to Q&A at the end, so please feel free to ask away. I'll be flagging those for our speakers today. And our speakers today are Julie Lee, the Director of People Operations here at Namely, and Corey Berkey, the Director of HR over at Jazz HR. They've worked pretty hard on the content today, and I know they both have quite a bit of experience on this topic, so you're going to get a lot of actionable takeaways from today's webinar. Specifically, what we're going to touch on today, we're going to briefly kind of set the stage, go through an introduction for why this stuff is important, especially now at the end of the year going into 2018. Then we're going to jump to making your goals smart. I'm sure a lot of you guys have used this framework, but we're really going to dive into how you make goals specific, actionable, etc. We'll cover that framework. Then we're going to really dive into using this framework to set very specific goals. I think there's going to be a lot of good stuff in this specific section. One of the ones I'm really excited to hear about today. And next, once you've kind of heard about the framework, you've got some examples, we're going to talk about planning ahead for your specific organization, chat about 2018 HR goals, and we'll even field some questions. We've got some nice bonuses here, so stay tuned for that. Next, we're going to jump into how you can use this framework and not only look at 2018, but really not only look at 2018, but really use it for a framework moving forward throughout your whole career and even throughout your whole organization. So as I mentioned, brought to you by both Jazz HR and Namely. We're going to get to some Q&A at the end, so stay attentive, keep the screen up. We've got some really good stuff coming your way. So let's jump right into the introduction. Let's set the stage for this webinar. The reason we want to talk about goal setting in 2018 is HR really drives the employee experience. This is from payroll to benefits to employee engagement. HR is really at the forefront of this whole movement. And it's not only critical for your people, but it's also critical for driving the business forward. Setting goals should align, honestly, with like top leadership. Everything that you do in HR is going to help the bottom line, and we'll dive into that today. And kind of going off that, every goal and priority you have in HR is going to help the business achieve their overall goals. So let's start with this. What goals should you set in 2018, and what can you actually do to hit those goals? I think a lot of people join webinars that are really focus heavily on information, but this one, you're going to get quite a bit of actionable stuff. So I'm excited to jump in. I think first we're going to pass it over to Corey Berkey from Jazz HR, who's going to chat right about making your goals smart.
Thanks, Alex, and good afternoon, everybody. We are going to start off with just sort of like a level set on exactly how we look at the SMART framework and really what that means to us. So, Alex, if you want to push me over to the next slide, I'd appreciate it. First things first is, everybody knows the acronym, everybody sees this, even if you don't use it in your own business, you certainly have experienced this or read about it through any number of sources that provide HR folks with really great information. We're going to be talking today about SMART goals as in specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. And to, just further make sure that we're all on the same page, we're going to step through each one of these different criteria and share a little bit of how I look at these whenever I'm going through goal setting with our team at Jazz HR. And Julie's also going to be offering some commentary throughout, sort of the background on SMART and how Namely approaches this. So let's go ahead to that next slide and talk about specific first. Setting goals with a specific target, everybody knows this is really a huge key for all of us in any organization, regardless of your role. We always want to make sure when setting goals for anyone on any team that they're really clear and easy to understand with well-defined targets, because those are what help us really eliminate that ambiguity. Vague goals often go unmet, and it's because the people who are responsible for them don't necessarily have the exact criteria that define success, is how I usually phrase it. We also talk about defining exactly what the goals are and in what ways you plan to reach those goals and what really the successful metrics look like. Don't just say you want to increase employee retention. Talk about what does that mean? What is success in increasing retention and how is that defined? Things like percentage changes, headcount changes, and really what it means to have a better retention rating are great examples to talk about whenever we're thinking about the specific criteria here. I also find that really specific goals help eliminate, any waffling that goes back and forth on whether or not a goal was met. That's something to really keep in mind. Specificity in goal setting is absolutely a key. And it's actually really closely related to the measurable criteria. So we're going to talk about that as well. When we talk about measurable, you absolutely want to see that relationship between a specific goal and a goal that's measurable. These have to be hand in hand because there has to be a way to measure that success like we talked about. Your goal has to have a metric behind it, a number behind it, or some really clear criteria, because in some cases, a goal is best defined by whether it was achieved or not. But don't hesitate to pull metrics into HR if you're not doing this already. Your people operations, there are numbers and metrics galore that we can look at that really help us define what a successful goal accomplishment looks like. And like I said, this notion of having a measurable goal also helps eliminate that, any notion of ambiguity and makes it easier to objectively evaluate performance. Looking through some of the questions to ask yourself down below here, how many new hires do you want to bring on this year? The answer is a number. Did you reach that number? Did you exceed that number? Did you not hit it? And why? What percentage are you going to reduce your cost per hire? We all see this. If you're related to the people function, or if you're a hiring manager in your business, you should see the cost of bringing a new hire into your business, or the cost of turnover, and understanding what that is combined with actionable plans on reducing it. That's a really great goal to consider. And also, how much time will you save every month by automating certain processes? Obviously, Jazz HR and Namely together are technology companies in the HR space. And we look at how our platforms help HR professionals automate their processes and the efficiencies that are gained and the cost savings associated with that type of efficiency. So when we talk about measurable, obviously, very key to relate it back to specific, but don't overlook the metrics and analytics that go behind making different goals measurable for your team. Let's keep going forward, Alex. Achievables up next here. And this criteria is important to consider throughout the goal setting process, because this is like the gut check. This is where you really get the chance to determine whether or not a goal is realistic. We all know, regardless of what your goal mechanism is, or what your goal setting theme is, whether you're using MBOs or OKRs or any number of other methodologies, you can apply the SMART technique to your goal setting. And while stretch goals are absolutely important to challenge yourself and challenge your team, you also want to make sure that you're not setting everybody up for failure by making every goal a stretch goal, or making every goal set so high above bar. You want to make sure that these goals are achievable based on the time, which we're going to come to in just a second, that each person has to work on them. And make sure that as you're setting those goals, they should be able to be realistically achieved through the action plan that you have to put together to achieve said goal. Achievable obviously becomes a really key component. That brings us into our next topic, which is relevant. This is one of my favorites because there's a little bit of hidden implication around alignment here. Relevant goals are a significant contributor to your organizational alignment, and that's because each person's goal on your teams, each team's goal within your organization, no matter what that goal is, and whether it's for a team or for an individual contributor or for a manager, those goals should always align with some sort of bigger objective that the business is trying to achieve. How do you relate those goals cross-departmentally? How do you take goals in your organization and make them more meaningful through relevance to the broader company? Make sure that, whenever you're looking at your goals and their relevance to the business, if they're not aligned with the broader business, sometimes they almost serve as like an unintended distraction, because you've got people working towards accomplishing things, and it's difficult to create the relationship between what they're working on and how that's pushing the business further, which is absolutely a core focus. You've got to have this right at the forefront of your mind. The last criteria that we'll talk about here is time-based. Time-based is probably one of the most flexible when setting goals, but one of the most rigid on sort of reconciling whether or not a goal has been achieved. You might have a goal that's on a monthly basis, a quarterly basis, or certainly on an annual basis. And you'll also see, as you're setting goals for your business and applying that SMART methodology, that your goals and the timing of those goals is really a key factor. I find oftentimes when setting goals, the business's goals are on a more quarterly or annual basis. And as you work between individual contributors and managers, you'll see that, individual contributors oftentimes have monthly or mid-quarter goals that lead into bigger team quarterly goals. But think about that stacking of goals. Think about the interdepartmental sort of dependencies from one individual contributor at your company and another. And also think about how different team goals aligned with your organizational goals come together. If one of the big goals in Q3 at your business is sales achieving a certain growth rate, well, how does marketing contribute to that through their efforts? And what's the timing of marketing's contributions? If sales goal is going to be evaluated at the end of your third quarter, marketing's goals are probably due in the second quarter because of how your business flows. So just be conscious of that time-based criteria and make sure, here again with achievable, that the goals you're setting and creating for your team are achievable within the time frame discussed. This really helps make those goals more precise so that you can accurately assess whether or not those goals have really been achieved and what they're doing for your business overall. We spent a few minutes here going through this SMART methodology. We've talked a little bit about how these apply to your business. And we also want to make sure that we take some time to sort of set the stage and talk about goals in action. And before we jump into that, and before I jump over to Julie to take us through this, Julie, can you speak to maybe how you've seen any of these criteria play out at Namely, or how you think about things in setting SMART goals at Namely to help align with this methodology and make sure that it's sort of a unanimous across the board adoption of this practice?
Sure thing, Corey. Thanks for that. I think the one that you pointed out earlier on relevant is actually one that I also really love. And it's a really important one because sometimes I think it gets a little bit overlooked because we're all really focused on doing our best and achieving, whatever's in front of us, but really thinking through at the corporate level how what we do every day aligns with the company objectives. So just to give you an example from Namely, our CEO actually announces our company objectives for the next year. For example, in November, we just got them for 2018. And our process internally here is all the department leaders actually host workshops with the members, their entire teams, to talk through the company goals, what they really mean for themselves as a department, and how their department as a whole can work to achieve those 5 company goals that we've set forth. So it's a really great process to tie everyone's motivation together and have a common set of priorities. And actually, really interestingly, we have a neat feature in the Namely product that has ability for us to enter in our company level goal, our department level goal, and our personal goals. And for each individual goal that you do enter in, you can select which department and company level goal that aligns to. So really by that conversation that you have with the rest of your team, the conversation that you have with management, you're going to make sure that everyone is aligned to make sure that really we're all moving in the same direction. And Corey, to your point, that there's no unnecessary distractions as we go along. So that's one example that I like to share from Namely. I'll pass it back to you, Corey.
Thanks, Julie. We are going to keep on moving and talk about example goals. And Julie and I are going to go a little bit back and forth here and talk about some of the things that are near and dear to our heart and things that we consider if you were to maybe look at some of these sample goals. And the first one that I'm going to speak to here is streamlining that recruiting process. Obviously, recruiting that top talent in your business has to be a key focus. Every one of us, if you're in people operations right now, you're seeing a very full employment economy. You're seeing very low unemployment rates in most of the country. And those are contributing to a really, really hot talent market right now. Really great to see that. But if you're one of the people who's out there searching for qualified candidates to join your team, like I know I am, and I know Julie is as well, if you're out there searching, you're seeing some of the struggles that come from the recruiting side of the house and talent acquisition side of the house in these types of full employment markets. That's why recruiting top talent is going to continue to be a key focus, I feel, for each of us. And this has to be from the top of your organization to the bottom and across every single functional area in your business. One key contributor to keeping that recruiting process flowing and well organized is implementing an applicant tracking system. And you can see here the sample goal is implement an ATS by the end of Q2 to streamline communication with candidates and reducing time to fill roles by 25%. If you think back to how we sort of broke down that SMART methodology to goal setting, you can see how we've constructed this goal to align with that SMART methodology. We've got a time focus, end of Q2. We've got the details of what this is to accomplish, and we've got a metric in here. We've got a way to measure success in the role, filling roles, reducing the time to fill roles, excuse me, by 25%. That's a pretty strong metric that speaks volumes, I think, to most businesses. And I think to how companies like Jazz HR really help streamline that process. There's an opportunity to start to zero in on valuable reports that come out of a quality ATS, and those reports let you see things like time to fill. They let you see where candidates are getting jammed up in your recruiting process, because we all know recruiting processes are not getting more simplified. We're getting more complex and more robust in the way we recruit because we're all being more collaborative in that process. And it's important that as we as people professionals are marching towards 2018, we're really looking at how we understand the metrics behind talent acquisition and that recruiting process. And that's where reports from a great applicant tracking system can really help you zero in on not only your current performance, but identify those areas where performance improvement is going to do volumes of good to your business overall. We find that this enables us to really keep all lines of communication open while monitoring and better managing candidate flow through our processes. Because a good ATS is not only going to tell you what stage you have candidates in each particular workflow, but it's also going to manage those communications for you and help you not only speak in and communicate and engage candidates more efficiently, but it's also going to help you enhance that candidate experience, because if you have a great candidate experience, that's one more weapon in your arsenal that helps you keep that top talent coming in. And that's actually a great segue into the next step. You know, what comes after recruiting? Obviously, onboarding and modernizing that process. So Julie, I'd love to hear your take on this.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. So what comes after getting the recruit to come into your company? You found great talent, so now you want to bring them on. Modernizing the onboarding process is a really great goal to talk about today, because I'm sure that is a common pain point for many of us. Right? We all know that onboarding could be quite a process because of all the paperwork involved in getting a person settled into your company. It's a critical interaction point with your future employees because it's one of their first touch points with your company after they actually accept their offer. So you want to make sure you create a wonderful experience for them and really welcome them into your company, right, with a wonderful process. So your goal could be to modernize onboarding process this year. But what does that really mean, and how can you really go about achieving this goal? So let's be specific here. So you can see on our slide, we've identified that you can potentially implement an HRIS by a specific time frame, let's say for the first quarter, and make the process completely paperless, which will absolutely reduce the pain on both your side and on the candidate side. So talking about measurable as well in terms of the SMART framework, making the process paperless actually in itself is a measurable component. But beyond that, you can also think about some other ways to measure whether or not your onboarding process has been improved by asking the employee and the HR admins about their experience throughout the entire process. Some of the metrics that you can think about could be decreasing the time it takes to onboard an employee. And you can also think about how many handoffs are in the process currently and how many handoffs are in the process after you implement an HRIS, right? Because you want to reduce that number of handoffs, you want to decrease the amount of time, and you really want to create a very smooth process for someone coming into your company so they have a wonderful first impression. So as you can see from the example on the left and the right in terms of how we've been able to modify the goal, just keep in mind that you want to be as specific as possible so you can really show the impact of achieving this goal and why the process is now much better than before. So the next piece that we want to talk about is employee engagement. So now you've identified wonderful candidates, you've brought them on board with a really great and smooth onboarding process, and now they're part of your company. What next, right? As HR practitioners, I am sure that for all of you on the phone here, boosting employee engagement is something that's always on our minds, no matter what stage of the company you're in, and how wonderful of an employee of a workplace you already have. It's something that we always want to continue to do because that's what we're passionate about. So I kind of want to launch a poll at this point. I'm really curious. One of the ways that we measure employee engagement here at Namely is by using an engagement survey. I'm curious about how many of you on the phone right now already use engagement surveys at your companies to track the engagement.
Awesome. So we're seeing a bunch of votes come in. We'll give it about 30 more seconds. Give everyone a chance to vote there.
Perfect. All right. Thanks for everyone for joining. It looks like we have about half, which is very interesting. I love this statistic because it looks like a lot of you guys have already been using this great tool, but I think there is also opportunity to think about it in case you have not thought about it as of yet. So for example, in boosting employee engagement, as we sit on the right side, one of the first things you can do is to develop and launch an employee engagement program, which includes a survey. A survey is a really great way to get feedback directly from your employees on how they're currently feeling about the company, right? It could be questions around the culture of the company, the strategy, how they are feeling about the direction that the company is moving in, how they feel about the leadership, the management team. It really is about thinking through what are the most critical aspects that you really think are necessary to understand more about at your company, and then putting those in the employee engagement survey. So again, we talk about boosting employee engagement and the survey, but what can you do to actually increase the engagement? So the survey itself was just a measure of the engagement at a point in time, but what are some things that we can actually do, right? So a few suggestions that we've come up here is develop a rewards and recognition component, maybe a lunch and learn series. You want to be able to have improved communications to boost people's awareness around the key business initiatives for the year. So another great metrics to use to make sure that you're hitting your goal is to actually put some scores behind the engagement survey and some goals for those scores. So if you launch your engagement survey, let's say at the end of Q1 next year, and you're getting 60%, you can hit a goal of increasing scores by 30, which is a very, very lofty goal. So you might want to bring that down depending on where you are in the organization, but you want to do it again, for example, at the end of Q4 and maybe increase the score by a certain percentage, right? So it's really talking about how we can take a big idea like boosting employee engagement and really be very specific about the steps that you can actually take and how you can measure that this is being done at your company. All right, so Corey is going to talk us through our last example, that is really near and dear to all of our hearts as HR professionals, which is payroll and benefits.
Thanks, Julie. And that, I think, we all know that that is the truth. And you can see here in the example, move all payroll and benefits administration to an HRIS system by the end of Q1. Use that new platform to enable a better self-service and enable a better self-service experience and to reduce overhead and expenses by 10% by the end of Q3. So, if we think back to that SMART framework, we can see how each one of those various components of SMART methodology is applied here. We've got the time, we've got relevance, we've got the achievable. We're running everything here. We've got specific and measurable. But think about how this applies to your business. If you aren't leveraging technology for some of those most core people functions, you really are missing out on a couple of key functions that will help make your life as a practitioner of HR much easier. Think of the power and efficiency you gain by having central data sources for all things people related. Even at Jazz HR, as we've been working with Namely to get our systems in place and sort of polish off some of our procedures to enhance the efficiency around our HR department. It's interesting to see that the types of solutions out there are really able to be leveraged to not only improve the employee experience, but also improve the administrator experience. So, if you're not thinking about how to use technology in an HR capacity, or not thinking about how to leverage technology for efficiency and value add to what's going on within the world of people operations at your business, it's time to start thinking about those things. Frankly, I mean, if you look at the world of business and technological utilization across the board, it's HR's time to shine. There are a lot of great resources out there for practitioners in our world that can help make life more efficient and streamline all of our processes. So, this is a great goal. If you haven't already thought about this is something to really think about and hone in on as you're planning for 2018. Having said that, we're going to move forward now, and let's talk specifically about 18. Let's talk about how 2018 is something that we all have an impact on, and what this means for each of our businesses. So let's start off by talking about thinking about streamlining the hiring and the onboarding process, thinking about how to make improvements within your business to help be more cost effective. First and foremost, there's a pretty compelling statistic here. Filling a new position takes an average of 42 days and typically costs about $4,100. Now, not every business has the resources to sort of calculate these with a great level of detail, but as an average, the $4,100 right there is pretty staggering. And think about the number of new hires you plan to make in the upcoming year. Think about the time it takes to fill based on maybe the employment market where your business is located. Think about the days it takes to fill a position once it's made vacant. Invest in the right software that helps you automate these tasks. Things like sending out emails and scheduling interviews, there are a wide variety of great resources that help you in that world. We all know that those are pain points for us if you touch the talent acquisition part of your business. Really being able to automate those things takes a lot off of your plate, and also helps you, really helps you to enhance that customer experience or the candidate experience at the end of the day. And then we go into things like onboarding checklists to ensure, as we've mentioned, you've secured that top talent. They want to join your business. Now let's keep them there. So thinking about things like onboarding checklists to make sure you're capturing all of that necessary information really does become a key. And don't think that your onboarding checklist is the same for every open position within your organization, because I'll be shocked if it is, frankly. Each team might have a specific onboarding checklist, and I'm not saying there's not a lot of overlap from team to team, but even each position might have a unique set of onboarding tasks that are really valuable to getting that employee experience off the ground on the right foot. The first day is already stressful enough for anybody joining your organization. Think as you're working through your onboarding checklist on ways that you can help reduce that stress for a new hire and make sure that they're really engaged right out of the gate. And even things like a company-wide new hire announcement is a great way to start getting the journey of being an employee at your business off on the right foot, because it helps start to sort of create those relationships out of the gate. Having said that, let's talk for just a second about an employee onboarding checklist. We've got some examples, and when this deck gets sent out, if you can't click the link here, you'll be able to follow the link and head on over to a sample employee onboarding checklist that I find a lot of value in. I think it's something that if you have nothing as far as an onboarding checklist goes so far, this is a great model to sort of look at and model your own checklist after. So like I said, you'll be able to follow this link here whenever the presentation is sent out after we're done here today. Let's keep on moving on to the next slide here. Acceptance rates, another huge key thing to think about. Acceptance rates by way of offer letter. Average acceptance rate for an offer might be anywhere between 62 and 89%. We've all had the offer that we thought was a surefire closed deal come back with, having been rejected, or somebody wants to come back and negotiate some additional terms, and maybe that creates some sort of like a stalemate or blockade on moving that process forward. Think about what your acceptance rate is and how well you tee those things up. And this goes back to using an ATS and technology to create a great candidate experience, because fostering that strong communication with candidates throughout the entire process is a key contributor to building the relationship that helps you not only get the acceptance, but understand what it takes to get an offer accepted by a particular candidate you might have interest in. This goes a little bit deeper also by saying, make sure that your job postings are really accurate and comprehensive. You don't want to have too much in a job posting, but you want to have enough that you're painting a very clear picture and setting the right expectations for candidates who should be interested in the role to get them enticed to throw their hat into the ring. And also consider things like knockout questions. Applicant tracking systems today, and Jazz HR has a great feature that we call knockout questions, allow you to sort of make sure by way of asking some specific and pointed questions that really only the top talent is making it into your screening process. Think about hiring a Salesforce administrator and wanting to make sure that they've got experience with your particular CRM. If you're hiring that CRM administrator and you want them to already come loaded with the experience of being an administrator with your CRM, maybe there's a knockout question that specifically asks that. And if a candidate responds no, they move into a separate bucket, or maybe they're rejected right out of the gate. But the efficiency there by knowing that somebody automatically has not met the criteria that you're looking for in the role really helps you not only screen candidates more quickly, but also move them through that process, tying back to what we just talked about with regard to a really compelling candidate experience. Here again, we've got another resource you'll be able to check out on the next slide. Here's some sample ATS questions, things that you might consider as you are both shopping for an applicant tracking system or even as you're building out questionnaires for candidates that are interested in joining your company. Think about the functionality of your systems. Think about how you want to screen candidates and what questions are really important for you to ask candidates to make sure that you're filtering through to get to that top most qualified tier of talent. Having said that, here again with the progression of a candidate through the process almost, next up is new hire retention. And Julie, I'd like to hear your take on this.
Sure thing. Thanks, Corey. So Corey's talked about bringing the right talent, how critical that is to building a successful company. You spend a lot of time and resources to find the right candidates. You spend a lot of time and resources on bringing them on board and giving them a wonderful onboarding experience. So now it's really important that these new employees actually stay and grow at your company, right? So we're all very concerned about retention here. Interestingly, as you see on the slide here, the research by Namely shows that 38% of millennials would leave their jobs within 2 years if given the choice. So let's think about that and think about what steps can we take to really improve retention at your company. So first things first, it's really important that during the interview process, you make sure you set the right expectations with the candidates. Be really transparent about the role and understand what the responsibilities are and convey that to the candidates during the interview process, right? You want to avoid any big surprises for them once they join the company. This could mean aligning on work-life balance expectations earlier on and also assessing the candidate for fit with your company values. So you want to make sure that they're going to be strong performers, but also live to the same values that you guys have set forth as a company. So of course, for anyone coming into a new place, there's going to be a ramp period that's completely understandable and expected. So we recommend creating a 30, 60, 90-day plan so new hires can feel really supported in their transition into your company. This is a plan that you really should be working with a hiring manager or the department lead on creating so the employee can ramp as fast as possible and start being productive at your company once they're on board. So once they're also here, we want to ensure that they get engaged as early as possible through a great onboarding or training program. So just an example for you at Namely, we actually have built out a structured 2-day onboarding program for all new hires in all departments. They all start together and it's run by the people operations team. So there's an intro that allows everyone to learn about Namely, what we do, where we are in our strategy, what are our key goals for the next year for the company, and talk about all the different teams and departments we have here and how we all work together, right? So having someone come into a new role, a new company, you just want to make sure that you provide them with all the resources they need so they can be successful on the job. Another thing that's kind of interesting that I wanted to share with you is thinking about how you can integrate the new employee into your company culture as fast as possible. So here also at Namely, we have a team that leads an initiative called Namely Life. And these folks are responsible for planning volunteer events, sports leagues, community building events for all of our employees here at Namely, right? And we want to encourage new hires to get involved in as many of these programs as they like, so they can really start feeling like part of your company. As fast as they can to get ingrained into the company culture, really feel like they're part of the team and they feel like they have a home here. That is a much better chance at getting them to feel happy, engaged, and to improve retention at the company. So another area of company culture that really impacts employee engagement and retention is diversity and inclusion. According to some studies done by McKinsey & Company, having a diverse workforce is not only a good practice in general, but offers some tremendous benefits to the bottom line here, increasing performance by 15% for gender diverse companies and 35% for ethnically diverse companies, which are really incredible stats and things that we really should be focusing more on in the coming year in 2018. So now you know that we all know diversity and inclusion is really, really critical, but what specific goals can we all set next year in 2018 to encourage more diversity and a culture of inclusion at your company? So let's start by looking at the recruiting process. So job application forms, job postings are really the first impression that people have of your company, right? That's the first impression you give to new possible candidates. It's really crucial that the language that you use in job application forms and postings is reflective of your company culture and values. So for example, earlier in 2017, we actually conducted internally here a very thorough review of all of our job descriptions across the board to check to make sure that we have very neutral language, we have language that reflects our culture, and to eliminate any potential biased language that may influence someone's decision to apply to our job at Namely. Going forward in 2018, one of our goals in this area is rolling out unconscious bias training for the entire company and incorporating that training into our recruiting process for all of our hiring managers and for our interviewers. If your workforce is already quite diverse, what can you do to help foster a greater sense of inclusion and belonging for everyone who's already at the company? Well, a common practice that I really love is asking employees to volunteer to create employee resource groups. So we actually just launched our first 2 employee resource groups here at Namely last month, and it was purely a grassroots effort with support from HR. So as HR practitioners, we want to help set the framework. We want to be supportive, maybe offer a budget for this type of work. But what's really important is also to engage employees and have employees feel a sense of ownership that they can really affect change at the company and affect change in the culture of the company. So diversity and inclusion is a really, really crucial component of your culture and can absolutely influence your employees' engagement and their continued growth at your company. So we just wanted to highlight this as another area for you to think about as you think through your 2018 goals. So Corey and I hope that we've given you some food for thought as you plan ahead into 2018. So HR powers the company and employees. So you all really play such a critical role in supporting your company's achievement of its business goals in 2018 and going forward. So take a comprehensive look at your employee life cycle, starting from recruiting to the onboarding process to engagement. Think about other things such as payroll and benefits. Where can you identify areas where you can streamline the process, improve the employee experience, and also improve your personal experience as an HR administrator? Think about some of the tools that you can start leveraging in 2018 and beyond to really help you improve your processes for the ongoing future, right? So any tools you implement in 2018 should be able to help improve processes for any future number of years at your company. So we hope this was really helpful to you. We're really happy now to open the conversation up for your questions. I just wanted to throw it back to Alex to see if we have received any questions yet in the queue.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. Good stuff from both of our speakers today. We did have some questions roll in. And one of the first ones I'm actually going to lob right back to you, Julie. The first question that we have from an attendee here is, how do I send out an employee engagement survey to employees?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, right? So we know 50% of you on the call here have already been using engagement surveys, but for the other folks that want to start using this as a good practice starting in 2018, there's a couple of different ways you can do this. There's a cost-free way that I'm sure many of you might be interested in knowing about. We here at Namely use Google Forms for a lot of our surveys. And for our our employee engagement survey, we actually have worked with a partner called Old Culture Amp. But for those of you who are not ready to make an investment in that right away, I think you can really use some free survey tools like Google Sheets. And I think SurveyMonkey might also have a free tool that's available to build out an employee engagement survey. We think it's really important that you include every single employee at the company when we think about employment engagement surveys. Make sure that this is anonymous. You're communicating to everyone that it's anonymous, so you can get some really good candid feedback from employees across the different departments. I think I touched upon this a little bit before. For any of you who are thinking about building this out and thinking about what questions might be good to ask, just really think about the broad categories that are really important to you as a company. So thinking about manager or leadership capability, how employees feel about the communication they get from managers and leadership about the future of the organization and the strategic direction you're moving in. And then as we just talked about in terms of diversity, you can also ask some questions about how they feel that the company supports diversity efforts, right? So just make sure the questions you're using are aligned with your company values. And then one last thing is at Namely, we love NPS, Net Promoter Score questions. So how likely are you to recommend our workplace as a great place to work? And how likely are you to recommend your manager to others? So those are just some things to get your, get the thought process started. So hope that was helpful.
Cool, great. Thanks, Julie. Next question I'm going to actually lob up to Corey. An attendee asks, I don't know my time to fill. How can I track that?
That's a great question. So, I mean, obviously there's a lot of technology out there that helps you do that. Like I mentioned in Jazz HR, we've got some pretty compelling reports that will allow you to see that type of data. Maybe you don't have an applicant tracking system yet. Maybe tracking time to fill and being able to reduce it is part of the case for installing an applicant tracking system in your business or something to help aid that recruiting process. If you don't have a technology in play that can help you sort of track that time to fill, there are a couple of things that you can do that are a little bit more on the scrappy side of the spectrum. And the first one that comes to mind is think a little bit about, obviously the job is closed, or at least it has been partially filled, if not entirely filled, depending on the number of openings you have, once that offer letter is signed or once that person starts at your business. And you have that information because somewhere, whether you have technology or not, you certainly have signature dates for offer letters, you certainly have start dates. So think about that as sort of concluding the process of tracking the time to fill. Behind that, though, we obviously have to determine the date that the job was opened to help us sort of start to get an understanding of what type of time we're looking at. So think about what triggered that job opening. Was it somebody left? Okay, well, there's something to look at. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe an email came to you from a hiring manager saying, hey, I'm ready to start hiring this next role. There's another sort of date-bound thing, or even things as far as, depending on how you're advertising or trying to promote different open jobs, some of the activities around there, like credit card receipts from job posting purchases or emails to different folks who might have referrals for you. Things like that, though, not, the most scientific way by any stretch of really understanding that time to fill. You can look to those sort of data points to help you at least get a ballpark estimate of time to fill. And then obviously the challenging part there, the part where technology really helps ease that pain, is, you need to look back at your last several jobs that were filled. You need to look at even maybe taking into account jobs that are currently open in your business and around about what date you think you opened them, if you don't know exactly, to really help you determine that time to fill statistic, because it is really important. And, for all intents and purposes, if you think about, we talked about cost to hire, in the first part of the presentation today. If you think about cost to hire and you were shocked at what it was, think about how much cost of a hire increases as time to fill increases, because those two metrics in almost every scenario are definitely correlated. And so understanding that relationship is a key. But anyway, to answer the question, Alex, like I said, there's a couple of ways around it if you don't have technology in play, but certainly that's one way to make the process much easier.
Good stuff. Thanks, Corey. And next question, I think both of you guys could probably chime in here. That came in during the webinar was, we're having trouble getting good data out of our performance reviews. What is the best way to get actionable information from one of those performance reviews?
So, Julie, I don't know if you want to start there, and then I can chime in with some of the things that we're doing at Jazz HR.
Sure thing, Corey. So this is a great question because performance reviews are a really critical part of the employee life cycle at each of your companies. So we want to make sure that they're done well, and we actually continue to iterate here on how do we have better performance conversations throughout the year for managers and employees. So the question is about actionable information, right? So I'll talk a little bit about the metrics that we pull from our internal system to talk through what we look at from an HR perspective to make sure that people are setting goals. So just on a very basic level, because we encourage all of our employees to actually use our Namely system to input all their goals, we always make sure what is the percent of employees that have actually completed their goals. We do goal setting on a quarterly basis here, so we pull that metric on a quarterly basis. So we just want to make sure that people are actually using the tool and inputting goals on a regular basis. Another thing that we track is the percentage of goal achievement for each of the particular quarters. So it's a good thing to see what percent of employees or what percent of goals are being achieved in each respective quarter or period of time that you're trying to measure, to see, also gauge, we talked about the SMART framework, are the goals that you're setting achievable, right, attainable, and are they measurable? And also this piece actually goes to a lot of them, including time-based, right? So if you're seeing your company that 90% of people have input their goals, which is great, but only 10% of goals have been achieved in the last quarter. You really should be thinking about some better communications on why that is. Is it that the goals are too stretched, so they can't be achieved? Are they in the wrong, time frame? Should it be an annual versus quarterly measurement? Or maybe the metric should be tweaked a little bit. So I think understanding the percent of goals that actually have been achieved in a certain time frame is really, really helpful. And then really the last point I'll talk through here is we talked a little bit about alignment earlier on team and company goals. So we always track the number or percentage of personal goals that people have in the system that are aligned to team and company goals. And our objective, and one of my personal objectives for next year, is to make sure that that number keeps going up, because we want to make sure that everyone's moving towards the same mission. So Corey, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add from the Jazz HR side.
Yeah, I mean, all great data points there, Julie. And I'll tell you, a lot of what we're working through is we're migrating our goal kind of tracking and record keeping process into the Namely platform. We really are taking a very close look at alignment. We're taking a very close look at how different teams function with one another towards achieving goals, and really making sure that some of those cross-departmental dependencies are very clearly highlighted. It's one thing to give, to the example that we shared earlier, it's one thing to give sales a goal, but then, understanding the other team's goals, like marketing, or maybe your support team or your success team, and how goals go back and forth and relate to one another, that all roll up into those overarching company goals. That's a really key relationship to kind of highlight and identify. And there are a lot of great ways to do that. But ultimately then understanding, from company goals down to team goals to individual goals, sort of that success rate, and understanding what that means and how to continue to enhance it. Definitely key components to consider as you're looking to get different data pieces out of your goal system.
Fantastic. And it's great to see we have so many people still on the call, which is awesome. Jill just actually asked, do you have any advice in increasing efficiency across departments and or between different business functions? Julie, do you want to take that one?
Sure, that's a really interesting question, because there's a lot of different components when it comes to efficiency and process across departments. No matter how big of an organization you're in, I'm sure there are certain times where you feel like you're driving your own agenda forward, and sometimes it's hard to get everybody on the same page. So I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but the number one thing I would say is really that alignment piece, making sure that you're all really bought into the company mission and the company goals for that year, so that you guys really can sit in the same room and hash out your priorities and making sure that they're the same, right? Talking about collaboration across different departments is really important as well. So one area where you could talk about efficiency is making sure you're using the same tools. So for example, so if there's project management is really important for your company, and you guys have project management tools, are you making sure that all the tools are the same across all the departments so they all talk to each other? Something else could be, if you're a tech company and tracking tickets, etc., is the ticket tracking tool the same across the different departments that need to use it and view it, right? So it's just making sure that everything that you're using from a process and a tool perspective are as aligned as possible, and ultimately making sure that your overall achievement of the objective is aligned, so there's no conflict or potential friction between different departments within the company as you go both move forward to try to achieve your goal. So hope that answered that question. If that didn't get to it, feel free to ask a follow-up. I'm happy to clarify on that as well.
Great stuff. Yeah, that's a very general business one, but I think you did a good job fielding it, Julie. So good stuff. So we're coming close to time, and we have quite a few questions still rolling in, but I really want to get to this one because I think it's a hot topic right now, and I think both of you guys could speak to it. I saw a note about assessing candidate for cultural fit earlier in the webinar. How can I make sure my interviewers are screening for culture fit?
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in for this one because I feel really passionate about this particular topic. And I just want to talk a little bit about culture fit here in terms of assessment, right? I personally would recommend assessing for alignment with your company values versus really specifically saying culture fit. Because assessing for values really encourages your interviewers and hiring managers to be more open-minded as they look at their broad candidate set. And it can really actually boost diversity in the candidate pool and those in the pool that actually progress. So, for example, one of the ways that we do that here internally is that each interviewer for a position is assigned to assess on a certain number of our company values. We have 7. So every interviewer has assigned 2 or 3 values that they assess on within the interview process. And as HR professionals, it'll be really helpful for you to think about what are those questions that you can ask, whether it be behavioral, or it could be a case study question that you can really think about. You would be able to discern whether or not a particular person would act in a way that's in accordance with your values at your company. And then because each interviewer is assigned a certain number of the company values, at the end of the whole interview process during the debrief, you can now have a really complete picture of the holistically of whether or not the candidate will be a great fit for your company once they join.
All right. So like I said, we had some additional questions rolling in towards the end of the webinar, but unfortunately, we've only got about a minute left. So with that, I just want to let you know that if you have follow-up questions, please feel free to follow up with our teams. We're happy to field any additional questions or comments you had about the webinar. We love Jazz HR, great friends of ours. We really enjoyed the content today. Thank you to everyone for joining. We are going to send out those 2 additional resources as well as the recording once the recording processes. So you should see that in your inbox, hopefully by end of day, if not early tomorrow morning. So with that, I want to give a big shout out to the presenters. Thank you guys for helping us out today. I think you both did great, and I think we got some good feedback, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, everybody.
All right, guys, we are going to sign off, but we will see you again next time. Thanks for joining.